Ah, Hollow Knight. A 2D platformer with Souls-like elements. I'd heard nothing but positive comments about this game, and that although it has a lot of challenging aspects to it, the platinum does require some skill to obtain it, so I was ready to take on this challenge. Hollow Knight's platinum consists of various boss trophies, a ton of item/collectible trophies, and then trophies that are tied to both DLCs. So to start, I'm going to be playing through the main story for the first time, picking up whatever trophies I get throughout the playthrough. Then I'll be clearing up the rest that I may have missed, whilst also tackling the GRIMM Troop DLC at the same time. Then to end it, I'll be tackling the Godmaster DLC and the nail-biting pantheons that come with it. So let's not waste any more time. Welcome to Hollow Knight's Platinum playthrough. So we start off with our hero of the game. Hey, that's us. Where we are thrown straight into it, learning some of the basic moves like jumping and attacking. After venturing through this tutorial-like area, we arrive at the hub area of the game, Dirtmouth, where we are greeted by the Elder Bug, the only inhabitant of the town since everyone else has disappeared into the caverns below, yet to return. We rest at this bench, which is the game's way of saving your progress, then we head down into our first area of the game, the Forgotten Crossroads. Now, there isn't a specific goal to achieve since the game pretty much just says, here you go explore. Lucky for them, I like getting lost while exploring. You'll also come across many different characters along the way, like this guy called Quirrell. He doesn't have much to say since he is too interested in this massive egg, so we'll leave him to it. I'm sure that we'll see him later. From one interesting guy to another, we meet Cornifer, a cartographer who travels through the entirety of the game, mapping out each location for him to study. More importantly, he sells these maps for a small fee for each area. So with enough geodes in our pockets, we purchase it, now being able to see the entirety of the Forgotten Crossroads. We then come across our first station, meeting the Last Stag, which is basically the fast travel since this map is massive, and as much as I want to get my steps in, this will come in handy later, especially for a trophy. Speaking of trophies though, we fast travel back to the surface, and because we met Cornifer earlier, his shop is now open that his wife Zelda runs. She sells some very useful items, like the Wayward Compass Charm, which after buying it I got my first trophy of the game, Charmed. Charms give you various upgrades on moves and abilities which can be applied once resting at benches. Careful though, since you only have a certain number of slots available for adding more, so choose your builds to match your playstyle. Now being able to track where we are going, we explore some more and run into our first boss, the False Knight. Now, as you guessed, being the first boss, he wasn't too difficult. I say that lightly, knowing the future bosses that I was going to be facing. So upon defeating the False Knight, I unlocked the Falsehood trophy. Now being able to access this area called the Ancestral Mound, we meet this Snail Shaman fellow who seems to be a bit too friendly since he offers this spell that will help us, that being Vengeful Spirit, which is one of the few abilities that you'll get which can be used for defeating enemies. Now after tackling our second boss, the Gru's Mother, nothing that we couldn't handle, we find this Sly looking guy called, well, Sly, in which we head back to the top to find that he has also set up his shop, which he sells some different sort of goodies. Along with a few charms, he has a Mask Shard and Vessel Fragment. These increase your health and your soul meter, but both require a few each to get the full upgrade. And of course, just like any game I play, I chose to go with more health. These are also items you'll find around the game and both have separate trophies upon finding everything. So we're going to have to do a lot of exploring to get them. Now throughout the game you'll come across these imprisoned caterpillars, another type of collectible in the game, and as you find a certain amount you can visit the Grandfather Grub who will reward you with various items and a ton of geodes. And of course some later trophies. Venturing into our next area of the game, Green Path, a much more colourful area than the previous, we run into the Hunter. Scary at first, but he's friendly, I promise you. He gives us a journal which is used to track every enemy type in the game once you defeat one. Then there is a second number of enemies required to fully complete that specific enemy section. There is a trophy for completing every enemy section in the journal, so make sure you kill anything and everything you come across. Now, everyone we've met, I can say have been pretty nice to us so far, but Zote, well, Zote can go screw himself. I will carry on my journey, arsehole. Anyway, on to our next boss, that being Hornet. To be honest, at first I thought she was friendly since she kinda looks like me, but I guess we could never trust a pretty face. Although quicker and more agile than us, we defeat her quickly and obtain the Test of Resolve trophy, before escaping for us to run into later. We also acquire a new ability, the Mothwing Cloak, which now allows us to dash, the best ability in the game might I add. Upon finding the next area, Fog Canyon, by the way, F these jellyfish, I chose to leave very quickly and instead found the Fungal Wastes, a slightly nicer area. We meet a few more characters like Leg Eater, don't worry, your legs are safe, and this guy called Cloth, We like Cloth. He's a cool dude. Then just after that, we find this thing called the Mantis Claw, which allows us to jump off walls now. Then facing the next boss, or should I say bosses, the Mantis Lords. A challenging but also fun boss. Now, after being down to 1 health, I narrowly defeat the trio, and they unlock the way forward for me. Cheers, lads. Oh my god, there we go. Woo! Actually, maybe not, since now we are in Deep Nest, the worst area in the game for me. An almost pitch black like area that seems like a maze every time you go through it. See, even Cornifer hates it here, but he did a good job of mapping out the area for us. Didn't help much, unfortunately, since I did have my first death here. Kinda expected that to happen. Now, a bit like other Soulsborne games, I'll have to get back to where I died for me to get my geodes and full health back. Some good did come from this though, since I found this tram pass that I could use later for an easier mode of transport. Now being able to double jump, I reached this little hut and speak to this lovely lady, Salubra, who sells some amazing charms and some notches, but annoyingly we're a bit short on the old geodes, so we will return later. Going deeper into this place called the Resting Grounds, we come across this monument which describes the 3 dreamers, Monoman, Lurien and Hera. These 3 have something to do with that black egg that we saw earlier. We then get teleported to the dream world, where we are gifted the dream nail, which lets us cut through the veil between dreams and waking. We wake up in front of the seer, which she tells us that we can collect essence from these whispering roots and from warrior dreams, which I'll explain when we come to one. Bringing enough essence back to the seer, she will reward you with various goodies and more importantly some trophies later. Now, after opening the 5th stag station of the game and unlocking the trophy connection, I made my way into Crystal Peak. Quite a pretty looking area, but these enemies though, they can do one. So on my way back there, I found this guy called Zero, which are one of the many dream bosses that you can collect more essence from once defeating them. Right, let's get back to Crystal Peak, shall we? Hopefully I can make some progression. Maybe not. That Crystal Guardian's got my number. Luckily, I can skip him, so I'll come back to him later. I do manage to find my next ability, that being the Crystal Heart, which now allows me to super dash, an awesome ability. As you kind of guessed, once you obtain these abilities, you'll then backtrack to areas you've already visited and get to new areas that you couldn't before. So with this super dash, I return back to Green Path to meet the Nail Master Shio, one of 3 masters who teach you new moves with your nail. So the first one being the Great Slash, which at first I wasn't using it as much, but it will come in handy later. We leave him to his painting as we explore some more, finding my 4th mask shard, which increased my health and gave me the protected trophy. Now after finding yet another new area, the Howling Cliffs, and facing this guy called Gorb, yep, the name says it all, I then found Mato soon after, which he gave me the Cyclone Slash, another move I barely use. Sorry, but I struggle using basic attacks without getting hit, let alone these special attacks. I then chose to return to the Seer to collect this Pale Ore, which is a must-have, trust me. She also unlocks this place called the Spirit Glade. Yeah, don't do what I just did, leave them be. I'm sorry! Then returning back to the horror that is Deep Nest, where I can now use my tram pass to travel to the Ancient Basin. A much more miserable looking place than Deep Nest, but it's not as bad. After defeating these enemies, Cloth shows up again and thanks us for saving him. Too bad he wasn't around to save me shortly after. Come on man, where were you at? So attempt number 2 went much better as we face our next boss, the Broken Vessel. Another cool but challenging fight. Yes, it did take me a few tries to defeat him. Come on, I can't make the game too easy for myself. Once defeating him, I then came across the Monarch Wings, which is essentially a double jump. Now I'll be able to reach some higher up areas that I couldn't before. You can also attempt the Lost Kin fight, which is the dream version of the Broken Vessel, but this guy is no joke. Yes, I died very quickly, so I think I'll pass for the time being. I took the tram in the opposite direction this time and arrived in Kingdom's Edge. Haven't really talked about the music in this game much, but each location is spot on, this area being my favourite. Finding our good friend Cornifer and purchasing another map from him, we find the 3rd and final Nail Master, Oro, who teaches us the Dash Slash. Now with all 3 moves learned, that will come in handy later for a certain someone. Speaking of certain someones, we run into Hornet for a second time, which this time around, she defeats me since it's pretty much the same fight, but she is quicker and more agile than the previous encounter. Plus a couple new moves that I wasn't ready for. Feeling a bit underpowered, I chose to return later since the Colosseum of Fools was calling my name. Containing 3 different arena fights, with each being harder than the previous one, I attempted the first, the Trial of the Warrior, and yet like previous fights, I really struggled here too, so maybe I was trying to accomplish these fights at the wrong time. So instead I found myself in the City of Tears, where I picked up my 3rd Vessel Fragment, increasing my max soul and getting the Soulful Trophy. But even better, I came across the Nailsmith. His name should give away his speciality, and why he helps us massively. So with enough geodes and that piece of Pale Ore that I got earlier, earlier, I upgraded my nail twice, so I think we're ready to return to Kingdom's Edge and face Hornet again. This time, as you probably guessed it, defeating her for a second and final time, we obtained the Proof of Resolve trophy. To top that off, we get marked by the King's Brand, which I remember seeing a familiar symbol in the ancient basin earlier on. With the tunnel now collapsing in on us, we luckily get pulled to safety by Hornet, so maybe we have proven ourselves now to become our ally. Now, I was correct with the location of the symbol, as the door unlocks for us to start exploring the abyss. Yeah, as you can guess by the name, it's dark, pretty miserable, sad, and filled with a lot of bodies resembling ourselves. Exploring deeper into the abyss, we absorb the Shade Cloak. Now, with your normal soul abilities, there are also darker versions which give them some tasty upgrades, like how we can now dash through enemies without being hurt. That's pretty handy if you ask me. We head back to the surface to see what items I can buy from Sly, but turns out there's more to him than meets the eye. So Sly is the Great Nail Sage, which means he taught Shio, Oro, and Mato their ways, and since we've learned all 3 moves, he gives us a charm that increases the damage of each ability. Maybe not a great charm at first, but it will come in clutch much later on. Returning to the City of Tears, I pressed on and found myself in the Soul Sanctum, where I came head to head with the Soul Master, which was a tricky fight at times since his phase 2 has him constantly dive bombing you, leaving very little room to dash out the way. But once defeating him, you absorb that ability, the Desolate Dive. Probably the least used ability out of the 3, but it will help break any loose flooring to get to some hidden areas. Before pressing on to the next part, I visited Sly again for some more health upgrades and purchased this elegant looking key for a door I was still yet to find. Then after that, I went back to the Fungal Waste to collect some more essence, which I then managed to reach 600 in total, and that earned me the Attunement Trophy. So now that I had the Shade Cloak, I can now access a new area in the Fog Canyon by dashing through this shadow barrier. I found Cornifer once again, which helped direct me to the Teacher's Archives where the first of 3 Dreamers are. But before we encounter them, Umu stands, well, floats in our way. Unable to hit him with any basic attacks, Quirrell comes in to stun Umu, which allows us to get a few hits on him, in the end defeating him. Not a hard boss, but a little bit annoying to defeat. Inspecting this tank, Quirrell shows up again and tells us that he was summoned here to free the Dreamer after she sealed herself away to protect the knowledge of Hallownest. So upon hitting her with our Dream Nail and being transported to the Dream World, we absorb what's left of her, and in doing that unlock the trophy Teacher. Hey, we got Teacher. Destroy Monoman the Teacher. Okay, so that's 1 out of the 3 of them done. Nice. I then end up in the Overground Mound, where after a few tricky platforming sections, I managed to find the Howling Wraiths ability, the final one if you ignore the shadow versions. So with all 3 abilities acquired, I'm feeling pretty confident that I can crack on with another Dreamer fight. So I head back into my favourite place, Deepness, to find said Dreamer, but somehow I ran into myself. Huh, that's a bit weird. Don't get fooled by this imposter, since it turns into this horrible creature called Nosk. Another fight I was able to do first try, and I did get some Pale Ore as a reward, so it was worth it. Oh, we run into Zoe again for the second time and free him a second time, which he thanks us as he normally does, you know, being an arse. Also, if you thought I hated this area before, well, these enemies just prove my hatred towards it. But at least I also managed to free half of the imprisoned grubs, which gave me the Grub Friend trophy, so I guess that makes up for it. We arrive at this distant village where we are greeted by the locals who want us to take a seat and rest. Okay, a bit forward, but I guess we deserve it. Shit. Well, that is the last time that I'm trusting strangers. Waking up in this spooky, eerie looking den, it's a little bit of a maze to get out, not helping with these bastards again. I eventually stumble across the body of Hera and get sent back to the Dream World for a second time, consuming her soul and obtaining the Beast Trophy, which is Destroy Hera the Beast. So we've only got 1 more left now. Now, only having 1 more Dreamer left to find, I decided to return to the arena since I was a lot more powerful since I was last there. The first one, the Trial of the Warrior, was the first I completed after having Zoe as a boss fight. Okay, he kind of deserves this beating because of all the shit he's been talking about us. So after that, I got the Warrior Trophy. Then for the second trial, the Trial of the Conqueror, that was a little bit tougher, especially with these Oblobles, which I can't stand. I defeated both of them, and after being showered with many more geodes, I got the Conqueror Trophy. Now, I did attempt the third trial, but I was a bit of a fool in doing so, since I was very under-equipped for it, so I was to return to it another time. From one annoying area to another, I found myself in the Royal Waterways. Not as bad as Deepness, but I for sure got lost in here too. I found this guy called Tuck who had an infinite supply of rancid eggs. Guess everyone has a hobby, no matter how weird it may be. I then ran into the Dung Defender. Can't say I've ever met anyone that's so happy to be living in their own shit. As normal, we make quick work of him, which he ends up dropping a charm for us. In fact, being the halfway point for collecting all of them, which popped the Enchanted Trophy. Then after defeating this disgusting looking worm boss called Fluke Mom, ugh, just looking at it makes me feel gross, I decided to head towards the third and final Dreamer. tamer, not before having to tackle a wave of these Watcher Knights. Now, if you know me, I love boss fights that contain more than one enemy to fight. Could you sense the sarcasm in my voice? I mean, I struggle with one as it is. After defeating them, I dream nailed the final dreamer, and once absorbing their soul, I got the Watcher trophy. So with all 3 defeated, we can now head back to that black egg and see what's going on with that. But I've got a few things to do before I do that. So not too far away, I found the Shade Soul, which now increases the amount of damage I do with it, my most used ability, so that will help out later. I then came across this Bretta person who appears to be very lost and confused, but after speaking to her, she says that she is heading back to Dirtmouth, so we head up there right away. Turns out she has this unhealthy obsession with Zoe. I can't imagine why. I mean, he's a douche. But after searching her house, we find a statue that we can dream now, and it takes us into her fantasy land. Oh no, there's more of them, including Grey Prince Zoe, who is too terrifying, beautiful, and powerful for us to handle right now, so I have to come back later for this one. Now, since I missed Cornifer back in the Royal Waterways, I returned to a shop where Zelda sold us the last map, which I needed to unlock the Cartographer trophy. Now with all the maps purchased, cleaned up after the main game will hopefully be a breeze. Then I managed to find the last stag station in the Queen's Gardens, which then this revealed the stag nest. Once travelling there, unfortunately we see the bodies of all the stags that once lived there, which means that he is the very last stag of his kind. It's a pretty sad sight to see, so then discovering this, it gave me the trophy hope. Now, everyone, it's time. With all 3 dreamers defeated, the black egg explodes, revealing the way in, and we end up finding the Hollow Knight, chained up and unable to move. We break the 4 restraints and set him free. Well, when I say free, I mean free for us to face. Now, as expected as a final boss fight, it was challenging, as it did take me a few tries to defeat him. His moveset was also very similar to ours, which was cool since it felt like I was fighting a bigger and tougher version of myself. As the fight ends, we absorb the Hollow Knight's soul, and thinking that everything is well again, we get chained up ourselves and locked away as a new egg blocks the entrance. With that, ending Hollow Knight and obtaining the gold trophy, the Hollow Knight. Now, you may think, wow, that ending was pretty sad, but there are in fact multiple endings depending on having certain items going into that boss fight. I got the evil ending. Typical me, I know, right? Now, there aren't separate trophies for each ending, but all are required for some later challenges that still haunt us. Now, we do still have the 2 main DLCs to do, both the GRIMM Troop and the Godmaster DLCs. But I chose to do some cleanup first, since I was going to need to be a lot stronger so that I had a fighting chance at these. So, to start off this very lengthy 100% grind, I returned to the Colosseum to complete the final trial, since if I was able to defeat the Hollow Knight, surely I was going to have no problem with this at all. Okay, maybe I died once, but it wasn't long after before I got to the final boss of this trial, the God Tamer. Pretty sure the fights leading up to him were easier than his fight, since a first attempt saw me defeat him and unlock the full trophy, and a lot of geodes in the process. 3,000 to be exact, which helps us with our next trophy, World Soul, since this fountain gives you a vessel fragment for sacrificing 3,000 geodes. This happened to be my last one, so the trophy soon popped after that. Then after facing the Lost Kin, properly this time, and not getting my ass handed to me, I gained enough essence to get the Awoken Dream Nail, and more importantly, the Awakening trophy. Now for the grubs. So after facing this creepy ass dude called the Collector, you'll find his map, which will reveal all of the leftover grubs on your map. Pretty sure I have most of them done by this point. So I very quickly freed the final grub and got the trophy Metamorphosis. Also, don't forget to return to the Grub Father to pick up a charm that he drops you for doing so. Right, I have someone I'd like you all to meet. This mushroom called, well, Mr. Mushroom. Rocking a schnoz almost as big as mine, this guy is involved in one of the different endings to the game. So you must visit him in various locations as you listen to what he has to say. You'll then lastly speak to him in King's Pass. Yeah, I may have forgot that I actually needed to complete the game again to unlock this strange ending, and also the trophy Passing of the Age. Ding. What the fuck? Boys. Then, to finish up the rest of this essence business, I gathered enough and returned to the Seer to receive my final reward from her, the Ascension Trophy. Now for the final hurdle to tackle before the GRIMM Troop DLC, and I didn't make it easy on myself. So this Grey Mourner person asks us to deliver this delicate flower to a specific place on the map. The reason why it's a delicate flower is if you take any damage at all, the flower breaks, which you then must return to them and start over. And of course, this location is all the way on the opposite side of the map. If I said this took me a few tries, I'd be lying, since I was stuck on this for a fair bit, but I persevered and managed to plant the flower. Returning to the Grey Mourner, we get the Solace Trophy for bringing peace to her, but even better, I got my final Mask Shard of the game, which gave me the Mask Trophy. Right, let's pause the clear up stuff for a bit, onto the GRIMM Troop DLC. So to activate it, you'll find a lantern hidden in the Howling Cliffs. Once lit, a bunch of tents spawn in Dirtmouth. We meet the man himself, Troop Master Grimm, who thanks us for lighting lighting his lantern, but mentions that our part is far from over. He speaks of his kin that are scattered across the whole of Hallownest, each one needing to be defeated and absorbed, a bit like Essence. But instead, we have this friendly fellow to accompany us. Now, it's pretty simple. As you defeat the first 3, you then return to Grimm for him to tell you that there's 3 more to do, this time being slightly tougher than the previous. Returning to him a second time, he demands that we put on a show for his fans as he turns into a boss fight. Being as quick and agile as we could be, all of his moves are challenging to dodge at first, but after a few attempts, I picked things up very quickly and defeated him, obtaining the trophy Grand Performance. There we go, done it. Defeat Troop Leader Grimm. He asks us for a final time to gather the last 3 flames. Again, tougher than the previous. So once all flames were captured, returning for a final time, we actually find Grimm asleep, which allows us to strike him with our Dream Nail, which unleashes this horror. Yeah, the double damage sucks, so I didn't last long at all. Now, apart from one extra added move, his attacks are pretty much the same, but as you saw, deadlier and faster. So after many failed attempts for almost an hour, I locked the F in and eventually put an end to the Nightmare Grimm, thus unlocking the Nightmare's End trophy. Question is though, what is the reward for it? Oh, well, there's a trophy, a Nightmare's End. Complete the Tale of the Grimm Troop. With one DLC completed, before we tackle the second one, and oh boy is it a fun one, I do still need to grab the last few charms and Hunter Journal entries that I was missing. So, of course, I left the King's Soul as the final charm, meaning I must endure the parkouring pain that is the White Palace. Once I found the second half and created the King's Soul charm, I returned to Salubra and I received her blessing and got the Blessed trophy. Then finally, with some help from my amazing Twitch community, I was pointed into the right direction for the last few hidden entries that I was missing, where I got the Keen Hunter trophy. Then returning back to the Hunter, I received the Hunter's Mask, which also gave me the True Hunter trophy. Now it's time for the Godmaster DLC. For the majority of you, you'll know the amount of pain that's expected to come my way, but for those that don't, I'll explain. So there are these things called Pantheons, 5 in total, and as you progress through each one, they grow in difficulty. Pantheons 1 to 4 consist of 10 bosses each, where you must defeat one after another without dying, with the addition of a new boss at the end of each one that you've never faced from the main game. You can also make these harder by applying these bindings, meaning you can have less health, no charms, etc. Obviously, I ain't punishing myself by doing that, so I'm just going to keep things simple. So, as expected, the first 3 Pantheons did test me, but I managed to get through them all quite quickly, with my fair share of deaths. Then attempting the 4th, the Pantheon of the Night, which for most of it, I picked up the bosses fairly easy, but Pure Vessel, an even harder version of the Hollow Knight, with more difficult moves to dodge, and to top it off, he does double damage. Yep, it's a fun one. I am glad that they give you a practice arena where you can actually try these bosses multiple times before you face the real thing. We're letting him stand in our way though, so after many tries and attempts, we completed the 4th Pantheon and unlocked the trophy Soul and Shade. Believe it or not, that wasn't the hardest boss. That lies within the 5th Pantheon, but to access that boss, we need to get a different ending to the game, which requires the Void Heart. Now, after defeating the Hollow Knight for another time, Hornet will come in and help you. By dream nailing him, you'll be brought to Radiance, the true final boss fight of the game. Her fight is more of a patience game whilst you dash past her many attacks, waiting for a chance to strike. Eventually defeating her, we pull her into the void, which ends up disintegrating the egg, but don't worry, it leaves Hornet unharmed and alive. This being a more sad than evil ending, but for us, unlocking the Pure Completion trophy for achieving 112% completion. Now, with that finished, we now have access to the 5th and final Pantheon. Thinking I'm only 10 bosses away from the plat, I was feeling pretty confident. What I didn't know that it wasn't 10, wasn't 20, wasn't 30 either. I had to defeat 42 bosses in a row to ascend the Pantheon. So after a ton of on and off stream attempts, I kept failing on the Pure Vessel fight, but since I'd already defeated him before, I eventually got past his fight to then meet the Absolute Radiance. As you guessed it, even more challenging than the regular version of Radiance. Luckily, once you get to her fight, it does unlock her practice arena. I was going to need it for sure. Considering that each run took me about 40 to 50 minutes just to get to her fight, dying over and over was really crushing my motivation. Pretty sure I took about a week's break from it just for my sanity. So, feeling refreshed and ready, I made it to Pure Vessel once more. Had a few close calls with him, but I soon made it to Absolute Radiance. Now, all I'll say is I popped off. Yes! Oh, end it, please. Oh, shit. Oh, do it, please. I want to see it. I want to see that plat. Oh, there's Hornet. Wait, was that me? What was that? I don't even care. Embrace the void. Ascend the Pantheon of Hallowness and take your place at its peak. And... oh, that noise. I haven't heard that noise in ages. Heart of Hallowness. Acquire all other trophies. Let's fucking go. I think that reaction says it all. The pain, suffering, time and effort I'd spent, it was all worth it in the end. Now, all I can say is this game is amazing in every aspect. The art style is so unique and visually stunning to look at. The combat tied with all the abilities you get flowed incredibly well together, making the game never feel clunky or slow. The bosses had a nice mix of simple but yet challenging aspects to them. All the different charms allow you to play the game in many different play styles. And as I mentioned before, the music just tops it off in every single area in the game. All around, there isn't really anything I can fault with this game. Do I mention Silk Song at all? I know that's a bit of a touchy subject. All I'll say is I can't wait for it either, whenever that date may be. Now, what's next on the Platinum playthrough schedule, may you ask? Well, let's just say that if you're a fan of some of my previous vids, then you're going to be happy that I'm returning to the series. Of course, if you don't want to miss that, then make sure you are subbed to the channel with notifications turned on. Please like the video if you enjoyed it and comment your thoughts on Hollow Knight. I reply to every single comment so yours won't be missed. Have a great rest of your day and I will see you in the next video.